How does an individual reclaim truth and identity in a world shaped by authoritarian control? Throughout the 20th century, totalitarian regimes sought not only to govern human behaviour, but to control thought, language, and the body itself. In response, artists and writers treated self-expression as an act of political resistance, a way of preserving the truth when reality was deliberately manipulated. This tension between power and individuality is exposed in George Orwell's novel 1984 and George Baselitz's oil painting Elke. Emerging from cultures which were dominated by propaganda, violence, and surveillance, both texts reveal how control operates by suppressing individual expression and reshaping the truth. In 1984, Orwell establishes linguistic reduction as a primary mechanism through which truth and individuality are controlled. Through the constructed language of newspeak, Orwell employs lexical limitations and systematic destruction of words as intellectual barriers, restraining free thought at its very source. As Syme explains, the whole aim of newspeak is to narrow the range of thought, revealing how language becomes both a tool of ideological efficiency and a means of psychological confinement. While the reduction offers citizens the safety of conformity, it simultaneously erodes the conceptual capacity for independent thought, forcing individuals like Winston to internalize for survival. Produced in post-war Germany, George Baselitz's practice develops in deliberate opposition to socialist realism, an ideologically controlled art form that manufactured political authority through idealized, false realism. This historical context is essential, as it positions Elke as a visual response to the same system of deletion, distortion, and enforcement that Orwell critiques through linguistic control in 1984. Elke represents conceptual reduction through its visual medium, colour. Rather than employing saturated or idealized hues, the figure of Baselitz's wife is rendered through muted reds and bruised blues, producing a raw and destabilizing image of the human form. This restriction of colour functions as a visual equivalent to newspeak, where removal of the expressive range limits personal meaning. By withdrawing vibrancy, Baselitz denies the viewer the comfort of visual certainty, rejecting conventional beauty and resisting the artificial optimism promoted by socialist realism works, such as Roses for Stalin, where heightened colour and monumental scale projects a constructed and ideologically perfect reality. In Orwell's dystopia, the human body becomes a site of political control, where personal desire and physical autonomy are systematically regulated. Orwell connects emotion and the bodily experience to the mechanisms of power, demonstrating that even the most intimate of acts are subject to political control. Sexual intimacy itself becomes an act of political defiance, with Orwell emphasizing that the sexual act, successfully performed, was rebellion, linking bodily desire directly to political resistance. Pain, suffering, and coerced surrender of the body through the thought police expose the contradiction of the human experience. The instincts of passion persist alongside the instincts to live. By focusing on the body as both a vessel and battleground, Orwell demonstrates that individuality is inseparable from physical autonomy. In the centre of Elke is the nude figure of the artist's wife, presented as a site of defiance and human truth. The body rejects heroic proportions and artificial ideals, asserting its individuality through an unguarded posture and natural form. Its vulnerability and honesty convey the complexities of human experience under oppressive expectations, where intimacy and personal presence becomes the act of resistance. Within this exposure, the figure asserts emotional and physical truth against a climate of conformity and control. As a nude portrait of the artist's wife, the work privileges intimacy and love over political propaganda, reinforcing the idea that self-expression rooted in the body preserves the truth, even when authoritarian systems seek to suppress it. In 1984, where thought crime is death, Winston's diary functions as a fragile preservation which the party cannot immediately erase. The diary records his inner self, capturing thoughts that exist beyond the official limitations of the authoritarian party. Writing becomes an act of political rebellion, not because it threatens the system in any material way, but because it preserves unregulated thought in a society designed to eliminate it. This act exposes a central contradiction of the human experience under authoritarian control. Winston remains outwardly obedient, yet internally resistant. His diary reveals the instinct to articulate the truth, even when such truths carry no hope of surviving. Winston's diary thus affirms that even under total control, the human impulse to record and reflect defines the self, exposing the persistent conflict between survival and authenticity. Winston's act of writing operates as a creative outlet that parallels the expressive force of the brushwork in Act Elke. Just as the diary captures thought before it can be corrected or erased, Baselitz's thick outlines, impasto paint, and visible drips preserves the immediacy of the gesture, an encapsulation of emotion made inseparable from the artwork itself. The intentional slippage of paint and raw, visceral energy of the markings deny control and rationality, mirroring Winston's uncertain writing, which records feelings rather than coherence. Both forms of expression are contradictory in nature. They are deeply emotional, yet politically constrained, private and intimate, yet filled with defiance. The diary does not liberate Winston, and the painting does not overturn the authoritarian systems of the time, yet both preserve unique and individual truths. In this way, the works resist what critics describe as a loss of the real, where political action is replaced with passive dominance. By insisting on raw expression, both texts reject the quietude and irony. Together, these texts demonstrate that in modern societies, struggles over truth are increasingly subtle. As language is compressed, bodies regulated, and images manipulated, the space for individuality narrows. Orwell and Baselitz reveal that when public truth is distorted, it retreats into the personal spaces and reveals itself through the necessities of human instinct. Despite their contrasting forms, 1984 and Act Elke construct a shared argument about power and resistance. Orwell exposes authoritarian control through linguistic reduction, bodily regulation, and psychological surveillance, whilst Baselitz confronts similar forces through visual denial and a deeply personal lens. Where newspeak narrows thought, muted colours restrict visual certainty. Where the diary preserves unregulated thought, raw brushwork preserves unfiltered emotion. It is therefore through deliberate acts of self-expression that both texts reveal how authoritarian systems distort truth and suppress individuality.